Once upon a time, a beautiful princess named Snow White lived in a faraway land. She had skin as white as snow, lips as red as roses, and hair as black as ebony. Now, Snow White's stepmother, who was the queen of the kingdom, was a wonderful woman too, but with every passing day, she grew more and more jealous of Snow White's beauty. You see, the queen had a magic mirror that showed her all the beautiful women in the kingdom, and it always told her that Snow White was the fairest of them all. One day, when the queen looked at her reflection, she asked her magic mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "You are, my queen, but Snow White is fairer still." The queen was furious. She couldn't believe that her stepdaughter was fairer than her, so she decided to get rid of Snow White once and for all. The queen went to one of her servants and said, "I want you to take Snow White into the forest and leave her there. She'll be safer that way." The servant took Snow White into the forest and left her there all alone. Snow White was very scared. She started crying, and she didn't know what to do. Then she sat down on a nearby stone and started to cry even harder. That's when a little bird flew down from a tree and asked Snow White why she was crying. Snow White told the bird everything that had happened, and the bird promised to help her. The bird flew away and soon came back with 7 little men. They were so cute. Snow White was very happy to see them, and she invited them to come and live with her in the cottage in the forest. Now, these weren't just any ordinary little men. They were dwarfs who worked in a nearby mine, and they were very happy to have Snow White live with them. They gave her one of their beds, and they all became best friends. Soon Snow White was very happy living with the 7 dwarfs. They would spend their days singing and dancing and their nights telling each other stories around a warm fire. But every day before the dwarfs went to work, they had to hide Snow White in their beds. You see, the queen had sent a hunter after Snow White to bring her back to the castle, dead or alive. But the hunter couldn't find Snow White because the dwarfs were hiding her. One day, while Snow White hid in the dwarfs' beds, she heard the queen talking to the hunter outside. The queen was asking the hunter if he had found Snow White yet, and the hunter kept telling her that he was still looking for her. That's when Snow White had an idea. She told the dwarfs to let her go outside so she could talk to the hunter. The dwarfs were very worried, but they knew that they couldn't protect Snow White forever, so they finally agreed. Snow White went outside and saw the hunter. She asked him what the queen had promised him if he brought her back to the castle, and the hunter told her that the queen had promised to marry him. Snow White then told the hunter that she was willing to give up her life for him if he helped her. She took off one of her golden rings and gave it to the hunter. "Take this ring to the queen," she said, "and tell her that if she wants to marry you, she must first put on my ring." The hunter was very surprised by Snow White's bravery, and he agreed to help her. So Snow White gave the hunter her ring, and then went back inside. The hunter took the ring to the queen, and she was so happy to see it. She put on the ring and it fit perfectly. The queen was so happy that she decided to have a grand ball and celebration. She invited all the nobles in the kingdom, and of course, she invited the hunter to. At the ball, the queen danced with the hunter, and they were the perfect couple. But then, in the middle of the dance, Snow White appeared. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress and a golden crown, and when the queen saw her, she was furious. The queen told the hunter that he had betrayed her, and he said that he was sorry, but he had no choice because Snow White had threatened to kill herself. The queen didn't believe him, and she was so angry that she pushed Snow White to the ground. Then something incredible happened. Snow White's rings started to glow, and they grew brighter and brighter until it filled the whole room with light. When the light faded away, the queen wasn't there anymore. In her place was a pile of ashes. The hunter was very scared, but Snow White told him not to worry. She knew that the queen had only pretended to be kind to him, and now she was gone. No one could harm them anymore. Snow White and the 7 dwarfs lived happily ever after in the forest. They were safe now, and they could live the rest of their lives in peace. Once upon a time, deep in a dark forest, there was a tiny cottage made of wood. It was just a regular cottage. Or was it? Oh no, it was magical. And it was home to 7 dwarfs who worked in a nearby mine. Every morning they would wake up with the sun and start working in their garden. They grew all kinds of vegetables and fruits there, and they loved to share their harvest with whoever passed by. One day, while the dwarfs were working in their garden, they saw a beautiful princess walking through the forest. Her name was Snow White, and she was being chased by a mean old witch. The dwarfs quickly hid Snow White in their cottage and then went outside to confront the witch. They were very angry that she had tried to hurt Snow White, and they told her that she would never find her in their cottage. The witch wasn't giving up though. She was too determined to capture Snow White. So she used her magic powers to look inside the cottage, and guess what she saw? She saw Snow White sleeping in one of the dwarfs' beds. The witch was so happy that she finally found Snow White. She flew down from the sky and tried to grab her, but the dwarfs were too quick for her. They grabbed Snow White and ran away as fast as they could. They ran through the forest, over hills and through valleys, and a witch was right behind them. But the dwarfs were too strong for her. They eventually lost her, and they were finally safe. The dwarfs took Snow White back to their cottage and gave her one of their beds to sleep in. They were very nice to her, and Snow White was very grateful. She promised to stay with the dwarfs forever if they would let her live in their cottage. And of course, they agreed. For many years, Snow White and the seven dwarfs lived happily in the forest. They sang and danced together, and they had so much fun. But one day a mean old witch came across their cottage, and she wanted to steal Snow White's beauty for herself. She disguised herself as an old woman and knocked on the door. When the dwarves opened the door, she tricked them into letting her inside. Then she took Snow White into the garden and gave her a poisoned apple. Snow White was so tired after running from the witch that she fell asleep, and when she bit into the apple, her beauty disappeared. The witch was so happy that she finally got what she wanted. She cackled loudly and flew away. When the dwarfs came out of the cottage, they saw Snow White lying on the ground. They were very sad, but they didn't know what to do. Just then, a handsome prince came by, and he saw Snow White lying on the ground. He was immediately in love with her, even though she was no longer beautiful. So he picked her up and carried her to his castle. There, he placed her in a glass case, and every day he would come and visit her, hoping that she would wake up. But Snow White didn't wake up, and after many years, the prince was so sad that he decided to end his own life. As he was about to stab himself, a drop of blood fell onto Snow White's hand. She woke up and saw the prince standing there with a knife. "Don't hurt yourself," she cried out, and the prince was so happy to hear her voice. He immediately dropped the knife and embraced her. They fell in love and soon got married. The prince was so grateful to Snow White for saving his life, and he promised to love her forever. And that is the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe for more content.